Viking is perhaps the most famous river cruise brand out there, and while we've been on over 75 ocean cruises, we just recently took our first Viking River cruise. So if you're thinking of taking a Viking River cruise, we put together this honest look of what it's really like sailing on a Viking longship up next. Welcome aboard, cruisers. I'm Don B from Eat, Sleep, Cruise, where we help you see the world one port at a time. And of course, our goal on this channel is to give you all the tips, tricks, news, and reviews you need to ensure your next cruise is smooth sailing. Up till now, we've only focused on ocean cruising, and we've sailed on all types of vessels, including the largest cruise ships in the world, like Icon of the Seas, to small vessels in like Windstar Cruises fleet, as well as ocean ships from Viking. And honestly, we were a little hesitant to try river cruising because we know it's considerably different than going on an ocean cruise. But given our experience on Viking's other ocean ships and its expedition ship, plus this itinerary and the opportunity to visit Paris, we figured we would try our first ever river cruise. And now we're back, and we want to share everything with you, from the onboard experiences to time spent ashore, and you can decide whether a Viking river cruise is right for your next trip. For this cruise, we sailed on Viking Radgrid, which is one of the Viking longships created for the Seine River. But Viking longships for other more popular rivers, say the Danube or the Rhine, are very similar. They're all about the same size, have the same amenities, and similar layout as well as cabin designs. So a lot of what we talk about regarding our experiences on the ship and what we liked and we didn't like should apply to Viking River cruises on other rivers. We'll also talk about the itinerary itself to let you know what we thought of the Seine River cruise for this 8-day Paris and the Heart of Normandy itinerary. One thing we appreciate on our Viking River cruise, which was similar to our previous trips with the cruise line, is the level of service. Viking takes very good care of its guests. In fact, this level of service starts the moment you arrive at the airport. With Viking's all-inclusive offerings, flights booked with the cruise line include free transfers from the airport to the ship and from the ship back to the airport at the end of the cruise. Now, for those of you who don't travel often internationally, this extra hand-holding is super helpful. And even for us who travel quite often, it was still nice to know that you had a Viking representative at the airport waiting for you to ensure you got to the ship safely. We usually fly in a day before any cruise, and for this Paris and the Heart of Normandy itinerary, the actual itinerary includes an extra day at the embarkation point. Thus, there's no need for a pre-cruise hotel stay, unless of course you want to extend your stay. Again, this is another benefit of Viking. It's a very thoughtfully laid out itinerary. Just in case there's any flight delays or any issues, you don't have to worry about missing the ship because the ship's actually going to stay there for the entire first day of the cruise, which gives you plenty of time to arrive, get situated, and then go explore on your own if you want. Luckily, we had a direct overnight flight from Boston to Paris, and arriving around 9:30 a.m., we were quickly greeted by a Viking representative in a bright red coat, and we were on a bus heading to the ship with about 30 minutes of getting our luggage. Unfortunately, Viking can't help traffic though, as it did take nearly 2 hours to get from the Charles de Gaulle airport to the docking location in Paris. However, upon arrival at the ship, the embarkation process was a breeze. We were checked in, escorted to our stateroom with our luggage, and ready to get our adventure started. If you're new to cruising with Viking, you should know what's included in the cruise fare and what's not. Included on all Viking River cruises are all meals on the ship, beer and wine at lunch and dinner, one excursion at each port of call, one device worth of Wi-Fi per passenger, specialty coffee, tea, soda, and bottled water. Unfortunately though, there's no room service on any Viking River cruises. There's also no pool, fitness center, spa, or casino. Further beyond beer and wine at meals, all other alcoholic beverages will cost extra. Viking does offer the Silver Spirits package, which is very reasonably priced at $25 per person per day. However, the drinks on Viking are also relatively inexpensive, so it would take about 3 to 4 cocktails each day to hit that $25 per day cost. And given the long days ashore, Heidi and I never had more than 2 or 3 drinks in an evening. Perhaps we'd have one cocktail at the port talk and then another drink afterwards during the evening entertainment. Now, of course, if you don't like beer and wine and you like spirits, then the Silver Spirits package is a no-brainer. Now, one staple of any cruise is dining, and Viking River Cruises are no different. On Viking Radgrid, there were two main dining areas, the restaurant and the Aquavit Terrace. The restaurant on Deck 6 is a formal restaurant that resembles a typical main dining room. With panoramic windows lining both sides of the venue, there are constant scenic views. The restaurant serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a variety of options and local specialties. Though you'll need to make friends, as there are mostly large tables and no tables just for two in the dining room. All the meals on Viking River Cruises are open seating. Food service each day also follows a pretty typical routine. The restaurant usually opens for breakfast around 7 a.m., and it's a hybrid dining experience. It includes a small buffet of breakfast items like scrambled eggs, bacon, and breakfast potatoes, but guests can also order off a menu with made-to-order items like pancakes and French toast. Lunch is served promptly from noon to about 2 p.m. each day, which means all cruisers need to dine during these hours if they want something to eat. The lunch menu consists of always available options like the signature salad and a hamburger. There are also a few rotational selections that vary daily, like short ribs and an energy bowl. Each evening, dinner followed that night's port talk, and dinner usually started around 7 p.m. Again, cruisers can opt for an always available selection or pick one of the regional specialties with chef recommendations that include dishes like brie, poulet au mori, or beef burgundy. One evening, Viking also features a signature regional buffet for dinner, which for this cruise was the Taste of Normandy. While the menus are smaller than the main dining rooms on most ocean ships, the quality and presentation were top-notch. The second dining option is the Aquavit Terrace, up on Deck 3. Offering tables for 2 and 4, as well as alfresco dining, this venue serves the same menu as the restaurant for lunch and dinner. The only difference is a more casual setup and ambiance. Unfortunately, the patio was closed for most of the cruise given the mostly unfavorable weather conditions. So each night, it became a competition to nab one of the handful of tables available inside the Aquavit Terrace. In addition, cookies, as well as continental items in the morning, and 24-hour specialty coffees and teas are available at 2 self-service stations on Deck 3. Along with the selection of espresso beverages, they also offer syrups and skim milk. Thus, we had all the essential ingredients for Heidi's twice daily non-fat caramel latte. While we enjoyed the dining, we did miss more casual grab-and-go options that are staples of any ocean cruise. While the Aquavit Terrace did have continental breakfast selections, it did not offer the same setup for lunch or dinner. We would have liked the ability to grab a sandwich, or maybe a personal pizza, or a salad and bring it back to our room on some occasions, especially because there's no room service. Thus, after a long day in port, the only option is a sit-down meal. In contrast to the larger ocean ships on which we typically sail, Viking Radgrid only has 4 decks and hence few public areas. Deck 2 is home to a small guest services desk and a small shop with Viking logo items and children's books by Viking's Executive Vice President Karin Hagen. Deck 3 features a small library with books and games and an internet cafe, which is really just 2 computers. Forward on Deck 3 is the lounge. The lounge is the main bar and entertainment space on the ship. Deck 4 is a full-length sun deck with plenty of seating to enjoy the outdoors as the weather allows. It includes a smoking section and a walking track, with 1 mile taking nearly 16 laps around the track, which is considerably different than ships like Icon of the Seas that take just over 4 laps to equal 1 mile. Further, anyone interested can sign up at guest services to visit the wheelhouse, which is essentially the ship's bridge. But unlike a bridge on an ocean ship, this top deck wheelhouse is hydraulic and lowers automatically when encountering low bridges. While river cruising isn't necessarily the most accommodating with those who have limited mobility, there is one small elevator on Viking River Cruises to help those who need some assistance getting around the ship. With each new day consisting of at least 1 new port of call, there was little downtime during our Viking Seine River cruise. As one of the benefits of river cruising, guests get to explore off the beaten path destinations and quaint towns and villages that cannot be accessed by larger cruise ships. There's also more time in port, sometimes even 2 different ports in one day, and plenty of scenic cruising in between stops. Subsequently, the Viking Daily's list of onboard activities is more sparse when compared to ocean cruising. Even such, we did expect a little bit more enrichment on this cruise. One morning, a local artist did come on board to offer a lecture on Impressionism, but that was really it besides the port talks given by Mia, the program director, each evening. Once more cruisers are back on board in the evenings, there's usually some kind of activity taking place in the lounge. Following dinner, we enjoyed live local musicians, as well as a cultural activity like opera singers and a string trio. Now, I mentioned those daily port talks. These occurred every day, usually between 6:30 and 6:45. These talks included an introduction to next day's ports, tour options, and any procedural information that we needed to know. During our sailing, Mia also hosted a French lesson one night and a game show that was actually a lot of fun. The game show was also well attended, so we know other Viking cruisers enjoyed it as well. Having more game shows and group activities like this throughout the week would have been nice. Besides being a great host, Mia did an outstanding job organizing the excursions. She always had a smile, was talkative, and was present throughout the ship at all hours of the day. Given that she was essentially the entire activity staff, she managed her many duties well. During our cruise, we stayed in stateroom 219, a veranda B stateroom on deck 2. All the cabins on the starboard side of this deck are balcony cabins, while those on the port side offer French balcony cabins. Deck 1 of our ship consisted of standard staterooms, which feature river views through a half-height picture window. Deck 3 of the ship consisted of additional veranda and French balcony staterooms, along with a few suites. We've stayed in all types of cabins, from inside cabins to ocean view cabins, balcony cabins, mini suites, you name it. So we do know that cruise ship cabins are small. However, the 205 square foot cabin we stayed in on Viking Radgrid felt even cozier than the typical balcony cabins found on ocean ships. Immediately upon entering the room, the bathroom was on the aft wall. The tiled shower had just enough room thanks to double-sided glass doors. With 2 storage shelves and upgraded features like the premium bath products and heated floors, the bathroom was comfortable and functional for the week, and certainly an upgrade from your traditional bathroom on larger ships. Across from the bathroom is the closet. It featured deep shelves with a safe on one side with a clothes bar with hangers on the other side. The forward wall was a long table desk combo, which included 4 desk drawers, which we ended up using for additional clothing storage, and a mini fridge. Here you'll also find carafes of water that are refilled daily, and the Quiet Vox devices, which are utilized on most shore excursions. Further, the cruise line allows guests to bring local products back on the ship, like food or alcoholic beverages. Viking allows you to bring as many of these back as you want, and there's no corkage fees. So we think this is a really nice perk. The queen-size Viking Explorer bed was on the aft wall facing forward across from the desk. Each side of the bed had a 110-volt outlet, a European outlet, and 2 USB-As. There's also a nightstand on one side and a small kind of console table on the other side with 1 lone chair. This seating area was a bit tight, but the nook became my workstation for the week. The table was large enough to house my computer and charge various devices. Getting from the door past the bed to the balcony is a tight squeeze. But considering only 35 cabins on the ship have a veranda, we're not complaining. We appreciate having the balcony with 2 chairs and a table to enjoy the scenic cruising. Over the 7 days, we traveled back in time through several centuries. We explored historic chateaus, sampled French cuisine, and marveled at the heroism of the Allied troops at the very beaches they stormed 80 years ago. The 55 crew members of Viking Radgrid ensured we were well fed and well taken care of along the way. Cruisers that have sailed on smaller ships will feel right at home with the friendliness and quaint surroundings of this longship. With upscale dining, cozy accommodations, and twice daily service, Viking wraps cruisers in comfort and handles every little detail of the trip. Ocean cruises and river cruises are 2 different options to see the world, 1 port at a time. You get it? That's our tagline. But if you enjoy the comforts of a cruise ship and want to explore new destinations, we encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and try a river cruise. But we're not done there. Our Paris in the Heart of Normandy 8-day itinerary consisted of 7 ports of call. Along with Paris and the beaches of Normandy, the stops range from quaint villages to bustling cities. Each port along the way offered an opportunity to experience something new. And just to warn you, my French is awful. With 6 included tours and 2 additional optional excursions, there was never a dull moment. We wanted to make sure we experienced as much as possible for our first visit to this region, and if you follow our channel, that probably doesn't surprise you because you know we're over planners. We will admit that the quality of the tours Viking provided did vary, although we would say all of the guides themselves were fantastic. In fact, we had several of the same guides at the different stops, as many of these ports are not that far away from each other. Our cruise began and ended in Paris. Unfortunately, the weather was rainy and chilly, so we didn't get to explore much of the city on our own. This was true all 3 days we were in Paris. Given the weather and the crowds at the Louvre, we did not get to experience as much of the city as we hoped. But to be fair, with the 2024 Summer Olympics happening in Paris, the city is quite hectic right now. On day 2 of the cruise, we did the panoramic Paris tour, which is included with Viking, and honestly, it's a glorified bus tour that included a little bit of walking. We also had a quick selfie stop in front of the Eiffel Tower and a bus ride down Champs-Élysées with not 1 but 2 circles around the Arc de Triomphe for photos. We did get off the bus for about an hour near the Notre Dame Cathedral and the Latin Quarter. So the 3.5-hour tour was a decent overview, but of course, we would like to get back to Paris to see more of the city and actually experience some of these neighborhoods and attractions. In the afternoon, we opted for one of those optional tours, a tour of the Palace of Versailles. This 4-hour tour included a transfer to the 17th century palace. Now a museum, we had a pretty standard tour that took several large groups through 2 wings of this massive building. It actually reminded me a lot of the tour we took of the Hermitage, as well as a tour we've taken of the Vatican. Our tour guide did a great job weaving through the crowds, and she never stopped her narration as we dodged other tourists or members of our party stopped to take pictures and videos. Unfortunately, we had limited time to explore the gardens independently afterwards, as we got caught in a rainstorm. Later on the cruise, we would do another optional tour in Paris to the Louvre. Our tour guide here was the same one we actually had for the panoramic Paris tour. She was a wealth of knowledge and made sure we saw some of the museum's most prized possessions, including the Venus de Milo and, of course, the Mona Lisa. While Viking does offer some great guided tours, perhaps one of our favorite stops was the village of La Roche-Guyon. We strolled the picturesque streets of this small community situated along the banks of the Seine River on our own. We then opted for a self-guided tour with the Viking discount of the village's chateau. Using the downloadable audio guide, we actually spent about 90 minutes exploring the chateau on our own, which for us is pretty impressive. If you can handle the 250 steps, a walk up to the castle's bell tower is worth it for the panoramic views of the village. We had a similar experience on day 6 in Les Andelys. This time, we opted for the walking tour provided by Viking. We spent 2 hours strolling the streets of this quaint village with our energetic and enthusiastic tour guide. The most impressive sight is the 12th century Chateau Galad, built by Richard the Lionheart. Although perhaps our least favorite tour occurred in the afternoon of day 3 in Auvers-sur-Oise. This little-known locale is the final home of the Impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh. This tour included stops in the town associated with the 70 days the painter spent here before the tragic end of his life, including the famous church he painted. With the ship pulling to port on day 4, we had the most traditional tour of the trip, a walking tour of Rouen. For about 90 minutes, our guide weaved in and out of a few blocks, showcasing the 16th century architecture. From the half-timbered buildings, intertwined with modern-day shops and cafes, historic churches, and the town clock and belfry, Rouen was much different than any of the places we had visited up to that point in the trip. Besides Paris, for many, the other highlight of this trip was the full-day excursion to the landing beaches of Normandy. This day-long excursion included approximately 2.5-hour drive to Caen. One of the major holdouts after the landing, this city is home to a thoughtfully laid out and curated museum. From here, our tour headed to the American National Cemetery, about 45 minutes away. We had about 90 minutes at the cemetery, which included a brief ceremony at the memorial and time to roam the grounds where over 9,400 American soldiers are buried. The final stop was Omaha Beach itself. The 30 minutes here let guests walk along the beach and reflect on the D-Day landing. Back on the bus, it was close to 3 hours back to the ship, and while it was a lot of time spent in the bus, it was well worth it. On day 6 during the disembarkation day talk, the captain announced that the ship would be docking in Le Pec for the last 2 days due to high river levels. This has not dramatically changed our plans, although it did mean we were not going to get to walk around Paris at all. For the last day of the cruise, the included tour was of Napoleon's chateau. We had about 2 hours here to tour the early 19th century seat of Napoleon's government. While not as impressive as some of the other French castles we visited during the cruise, it was relatively empty, which was a nice reprieve. This gave the Viking groups plenty of time and space to enjoy this hidden gem. On most of our trips, the ships themselves are the destinations. While on a river cruise, the itinerary is the focus. With Viking Radgrid blending into the background, we were able to absorb the scenery, culture, and history. Honestly, we can't think of a better way to explore this region than by a river cruise ship. Viking offers several sailings throughout Europe, Asia, and even on the Mississippi and Nile rivers. So we suspect you'll find a region of the world worth exploring on your first river cruise. Now that you know what it's really like on a Viking river cruise, we suspect you want to book your next trip. But before you do, you want to check out our Viking River Cruise Tips video right here on YouTube. In that video, we share what we wish we knew before taking our Viking River Cruise, from the onboard experiences, how the tours work, as well as some insider tips for making the most of your trip. That way, your Viking River Cruise is smooth sailing.